first, of course, I have to tell you what SeaBreeze is, because I'm sure not too many people here have used SeaBreeze or Seaside for that matter. SeaBreeze is based on Seaside, and it provides like a graphical user interface to create web pages, and also creates some convenience stuff that does some housekeeping with all the Seaside stuff. And before I describe everything in more detail, I'll just go ahead and show you the demo. And in this demo, I want to create a new web application, add headings and text, and I will see how it looks like, improve the look a little bit. And let's go for it. So the first thing that you see is the SeaBreeze browser. This is basically your starting point, and this is all the applications that you created. This is currently empty, so we need to create a new application. And for that, you go and create a new application link. You see a wizard. You enter the application name, and you can customize all that stuff if you like. But the application name will basically provide default values for everything. And we just stick with these default values. Now, once the application is created, you go directly to the web painter. And what you see is a big white space, which is the preview area. And in the top, you see the toolbar. Underneath is the palette where you can choose HTML elements that you can add to your documents. Then there is a hierarchy where you see all your elements. And then there's the editor for the selected element. So let's just go ahead and create a heading. And this is a big heading, level 1 heading. And we modify the text in there, and we just say, hello STIC. And once you accept that, you see it in the preview. And we add some more text. Here we have a rich text editor. This is a tiny MCE that we're embedding here. And it lets you create some HTML with whatever formatting you like. And when you finish entering the text here, click on OK, and you see it in the preview. Then you can save your document, leave the editor, and that's it. You just created a website. And we will go back to the editor to improve the look of the website, and we'll do this by uploading a CSS file that I prepared and some JavaScript to have some interactivity, and also a background image so that it looks a bit nicer. And while I upload the files, you may see that there is a checkbox next to each file. So you have to tell the application to use the script and the CSS file, and when you click on OK, they are used, and the website instantly looks different. And when you leave the editor, you now have a website that looks a lot better than the default. And that's it. We just created a website. It was very easy. It was just 2 minutes, and we had a very simple website, but a working website. We didn't have to code anything. We could configure everything from the UI painter, and I think that's pretty cool. But no one uses the website with just a heading and a background image. So we want to talk about content today, so let's just add content to this website. Because we're at the STIC conference has an agenda. Let's use the agenda. So in the next demo, we will add content, lots of content, and we'll see how we do that. So for the first thing, we need to add a div. This is because of the CSS that we uploaded and because of the JavaScript, so that we have some interactivity later. We have to follow the structure that I assume here. Then we get a heading which is a little bit smaller, so it's 3. And you always see that the preview is instantly updated. And this heading is the label for the day. So here we say this is Monday, June 10th. And then we can add the schedule for this day. And here we use another div, and here we set the CSS class, again for the CSS or for the JavaScript. And in there we just add a table, and instead of creating a new table, you can also add the table cell, and because everything is an object, these objects know how they are related to each other, what their constraints are, and if the table cell knows that there is no table row around here, then it creates a table row, and if there is no table around the table row, it creates a table. And what you can also do is you can duplicate the cell, so you don't have to create new objects and start from scratch and configure these objects. You can just duplicate parts of this tree or the whole tree, whatever you like. And here you see that we're currently entering the, what is it? The name of the talk that is there, Continental Breakfast on Monday. And we can then duplicate the row and create our content in this editor. What you also see here is, next to the string there is a checkbox supplied by application. So in case of you don't want to use static text but have some dynamics, you can just enter a method name there and it will ask your application model for the content of this text. What you also see is a catalog and a key and a checkbox next to the key. And this is because SeaBreeze applications allow for localizations out of the box. And localization in VisualWorks is done by having a catalog with messages, and these messages have a key. And for each key there is a translation or a default string. And in SeaBreeze you don't have to enter or to keep the default strings and the keys in sync. It will automatically update the keys for you. And there are also some constraints put on keys, so you don't have to worry about that. And as you can see, it takes quite a while to add all the data. So I just go ahead and talk about the web painter that you see here. So in the top there is the toolbar, and you already saw how the save button works, and you can probably imagine what the big X does. It deletes an object. But there is also the box symbol that you see, and the box is used to embed an object into something else. There's a question? No, there's not. So you can just, I don't know, if you have a text selected and you want to convert that into a link, you can embed it into an anchor object. You also saw the duplicate thing, or there is the magnifying glass up there that allows you to open a refactoring browser on your application model, so you can easily go to the code if you want to modify the code. Well, now we are already at the fourth entry. There's one more. It's a coffee break with the schedule in mind. What you can also see up there is locale, and there you can test your user interface in a different locale without changing your browser configuration. So if you have translations for your application, you can just say, well, open the page in Chinese, and if you have translations, you will see your page in Chinese. So now we almost finished this part of the demo, so now we have a coffee break. And we can save this document and leave the editor. And you can see there is quite a huge tree now. And the website itself is very simple. You can click on the Monday, and you see the schedule appearing. So there's some JavaScript that's running there. So what happens if we add more days to it? And we do this simply by duplicating that part of the tree. So it's actually very simple. And here we duplicate the schedule twice, because we have 3 days of conference. And we also duplicate the heading twice. And then we just need to change the names of the days. We don't want to change the whole schedule. And you already saw that reloading the tree now took almost a second. And it's really a challenge for the browser to handle all the data. What you can see now is that you can collapse the tree and rearrange things. So if you want to change the HTML structure of your website, very easy and very fast. And here we update the labels. Tuesday the 11th and Wednesday the 12th. So now we have a, let's say, a proper schedule. It only has 5 talks per day, but let's keep it that simple. And yeah, we can leave the editor, and you will see 3 days, always the same schedule, but nonetheless, a proper schedule. So now we created a website that has a lot of data in it, and it was fairly easy to do that. It was maybe boring, but it was possible to do that. But you don't want to do that. You just mixed all the data with all the presentation, and if you're like, well, I don't like the table that we just created and it looks a bit boring, maybe you want to have a big name of the talk and the speaker and a bit smaller at the time in the room underneath. What you would have to do now is go ahead and take the data out and modify the tree. It's probably faster if you just delete everything and start from scratch. And this is not like how you want to work. So let's repeat. And repeating is what SeaBreeze can do very well. And for that we introduced a concept where you describe how something looks once, and then you throw a collection of objects at it, and it uses this description for all the objects. So if you have a class called talk, which has a time, a room, topic, and speaker, in your web painter you can add a so-called collection container, which works on a method called allTalks. And this method returns a collection of talk objects. And inside the collection container, you have the stuff that's repeated. So here you can say, well, this is a text, display the time, and another text element displays a room, topic, or speaker. And if you have a collection of, let's say, 3 talk objects, you now have 3 elements on your website that look all the same. And in the next demo, I want to show you how you can use a very simple object structure or object model that I created for the agenda, where you have a day with a date and some simultaneous events with a time and some events that happen simultaneously. And we will create the same agenda website using this object model. And so we go back to the editor, and the first thing that we do is we clean everything up. We remove all the junk that we just created and return to a very simple structure where we only have a table with one line, basically. And they see the tree, it fits on the page, and you don't have to scroll anything. So when we convert that into using collection containers, we can just create a new collection container. And here we say, ask the application model for its days. And we change the HTML structure. We put all the stuff that has to be repeated inside this collection container. And then it will be repeated for all the days. And instead of using a static label like Monday, we can say, use the date aspect of this object. And you can see the preview also shows the roof and date. So you can see here is something that's asked by the application model, or that we asked to the application model. And here we use the box symbol to embed the row into a collection container so that the table grows vertically and repeats the rows for each entry in the day for each simultaneous event. And in there we can say the first cell always displays the time, and the other cell is repeated. So we put it again into a collection container, and we have this collection run on events. So here we let our table grow horizontally. And you can see that the structure is still very, very simple. And you describe the whole user interface or the whole website using some very simple constructions there, and telling the website where to repeat itself and grow into some direction. And when we go back to the website, we don't see anything, because we didn't tell our application model what days is. So we go back to the collection container, the first one, and we say, well, days is a method. So when we clicked on the red arrow, it created this method and opened the refactoring browser. And now I just load the parser that contains all the code. And then I can say, return STIC day, all days, which returns a collection of date objects. And then I can close the browser, leave the editor. And here is our schedule. We have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the proper schedule everywhere. Pretty cool and very easy to use. And with a very simple description of the user interface. So, life's good again, right? You have a very simple description of the user interface, very easy to maintain, very easy to change the structure if you like to. But there's a big but here. You have a complicated data model now, and that's pretty technical. You need. We didn't talk about persistence here. I just took all the information and put it in the methods, so the classes already know all the data. You have to think of how do I get new data in there. I just went to the STIC website and grabbed the source code and passed this and created an object model from it. Maybe you don't want to do that. So you basically always have to have a small developer hanging around somewhere within there and say, well, make my website. They don't want to have small developers do that kind of websites. So back to the actual problem of managing content in SeaBreeze. And we had that problem ourselves because SeaBreeze comes with documentation, and documentation is basically text in some ways. So this is what the documentation looks like. You have chapters that describe something in a rich text way, so to say. There you have some text, pictures, some simple styling there. And you have a hierarchy of these chapters. And the first thing that we did was we used SeaBreeze to create all these chapters. So we ended up with a huge tree, and we already saw that this doesn't work. So we did the next thing and created an object model. Now we have a very simple user interface, but a very complicated object model. Same problem. And you could say, well, you have this very nice TinyMC editor there, just create an HTML editor for it. But this HTML text is not the only thing. You have more there. You have a title to the, what is it? You have a title, you have an index, you have the structure, and you cannot edit this in the HTML editor, we need a proper editor there. So we created the content management system in SeaBreeze, where you can have custom data that you can describe in a very simple way. You can enter data for this kind that you created, and you can structure this data. So if you look at the documentation, you have a chapter with a title, index, a description, and content. The description, for example, is used if you have subchapters and you want to give a short summary of all the subchapters at the bottom of your documentation. What we also do is we describe the elements that you can add to your document. And these elements, they have a name, they have an icon, and they have some content again. And in the content management system, you just say, well, I have a chapter and I have an element. And for the chapter, which you see in the foreground, you have the description, which is a style text. No, it's plain text. And the documentation is style text. And the in-text and the title are also plain. And then you can go ahead and enter data for these. So you have tons of objects that just have some data. And now you have data that is plain and simple and stupid, but you don't have a website yet. So we have to talk about how do we get this data onto the website. And for that we need to talk about how can you compose a website. And because we use Seaside, we can use components, which is basically like sub-applications in VisualWorks. You can have a website that you can embed in another website. And so you can compose things. So if you say we have a website with 3 pages, and you click on a different page, you can just swap the content and display something entirely different. And if you look at a normal website, you always have some surrounding frame on this website, some kind of hierarchical navigation, and some variable content. If you go to the STIC website, you see at the top there is this hierarchy where you can navigate through the website, and you have some content that's changing based on your navigation. In the documentation, you have the same. You have navigation on the right, content in the middle. So you have the main component, then there is a hierarchy inside this component, and you have the content that is replaced based on whatever you select in the navigation. And if we think about a very simple structure, like we have the tools, and part of the tools is the browser and the wizard, then what you can see in the content is that we can ask the tools, which is a chapter, for its documentation. But down here you see that actually you're accessing the child object of the hierarchy. So you can access both informations from your content. You can access the object that you're currently seeing and the children of the navigation. And if you don't want to see these children in the navigation, you can just don't display them. And this is the idea that I use in this content management system to link the data with each other and display it here. And if you want to render it, we introduce a new object. In case of the hierarchy, there is this navigation hierarchy, and it just works like a collection container and iterates over the objects, and in this case it iterates over the nodes in the hierarchy. And then you can say, well, if you have a chapter here, you can display it using a text that displays the index or title. And if you have an element, you can display an image and the name of this element. So we have data kind wrappers. They are like if true, if false in code, but here you just use them in the user interface editor. Another thing is that Seaside application always create a session and put this thing into your URL. So you have this _s_k thing in your URL. And what you really want is to have something expressive, like a proper path. And also, if the session expires, this URL is no longer valid. And if you're browsing the documentation, reading along a chapter, and decide to go grab a coffee, when you go back, you click on a link, and it takes you back to the beginning, and not where you want to, probably not what you want. So what we use is, we have this structure of a website, and we can just use it to create the URL from it. And you can either use automatic IDs, so it just takes the number of the index in the collection, or it uses manual ID that you describe in your editor. This is what the structure editor looks like. You have the hierarchy on the left, and you can just create some hierarchy that you want. And each node can be assigned to an object that it represents. Or it can represent no objects, so you can just iterate over its children. And there you see you have a checkbox to choose the automatic ID, and you can select the component that you want to display this thing with. So here you decide, if I click on this node in the hierarchy, what do I see in my content panel? And you can use the same information and display it in different ways somewhere else on your website. And there you also see the checkbox to make something visible in the menu or not. So if you just want to use the structure to structure your data and not to flood your menu with all these objects, you can hide them here. So next thing is I want to demo how to create this agenda for the STIC conference using this content management system, and I don't want to demo how to enter the data in the content management system because entering 60 talks is a bit boring. So we can just go to the editor, and here you see I have 3 days, and all the days have a description, ID string, and the name. The ID string is the thing that's put on your URL, and you can either base this on the description so you don't have to enter this information twice a lot of trees. And then there is a name. And if we go to the talks, then you can see that they also have a description and ID string because both fields are mandatory. And then the talk has a room, speaker, time, and a topic. And when we go to the editor to see how the data is described, it's just as simple as a date or a day as a name, and the talk has room, speaker, time, topic. Very simple stuff. So let's go to the structure. Here we can see we have our, I created a node for all 3 days. And inside the day I put all the talks in there. And that's also something I don't want to show you in the demo because adding these nodes just takes some time. And here you can see that the day has an object that it represents. And on the right there is currently no component selected. And yeah, that's because that's what I want to show you in the demo. How to create a component to actually display all the data that we create here. And it's really usage perspective. And you can see there are currently no components available. So we leave this editor and we create a new application that displays this data. You can also create multiple applications that works on the same data. So if you want to create a mobile website for the same data, you can do that. Here we just create one. It's called STIC agenda. And when we open it, it's empty. Of course, we don't have any data in there. So we open the editor on it, and we add a heading, because we want to know how the website is called. And in here we say, let's say, STIC 2013. And then we can just go ahead and add the navigation to it. And because our objects are very simple, we only display the days in our navigation. We can just say, create a data kind using the days. And in there, we just display a text, or no, we create div first for the CSS and for the CSS. So it looks formal. And in there we have a small heading and some text. And here we say, use the name attribute of the day. And that's it. We just created our hierarchy, or our navigation. And when we go back to the website, we already see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday there. And you don't see any content because we didn't tell this thing how to display its content yet. So when we go back to the editor, we say, well, add a new content component to it. And here we say we call it the day viewer because we want to display the day. So that's what we enter the name. And we click on add. And then it's there. We click on edit to open the web painter. And in here we now have access to all the objects that are subnodes of our day, and also to the day, but the day itself is not displayed here. So we just created a collection container running on the child object. And what we want to do now is create a table where all the rows are deleted for all of the talks that are part of the day. So we just move this collection container inside this table and let it iterate over the rows. And the first cell in this row displays the time, and this is an attribute of the talk, so we can just say this is supplied by the application. And we duplicate this cell, and in the next column we display the room. And the last 2 columns are for the speaker and for the topic. So we enter the speaker and then the topic. So very simple, we just described how the schedule of the day is displayed. And that's it. We save it, we go back to the website, we don't see anything yet because we also have to tell each node how to display it. So if we select Monday, we can say use the new day viewer that we just created, and we can repeat that for all the 3 days, which doesn't take too long. And now we can again go back to the website and see how things look like now. Still no content, because we didn't tell the website where to display its content yet. We only said display the hierarchy or the navigation. So now we add a subcomponent and say, here's your content. This is the way it's displayed. And we change the ID to have some proper CSS here. And that's it. We can save the document, go to the website. There is a schedule. everything's there and working. And when we click on Tuesday, you can see that the URL at the top currently says Tuesday, and if we click on Wednesday, this is updated so that Wednesday is opened. And so you can take the link of or the URL of the link and send it around to someone else, or let it open for 5 hours and click on another link. That all works, because the URL is always in sync with what you see. So we just created a website. That's also nothing. And we didn't have to code anything. We could use the whole system to describe our data, to enter data, to connect data with each other, to describe how the website looks like using this data. And it was very simple, I think. So there's one more thing. The new SeaBreeze website is also done using the new system, because the old website was done using the old system, so we created everything in the web painter, and you already saw twice how complicated that is and that you didn't want to do that. And here I just want to go through the website. You see there are some very simple posts on the homepage. Features looks the same, different content. There are screenshots where you see some picture with a heading and some description to it. We also have a link to a different website. Here we go to documentation. We have a link to the white paper, which is a file that we uploaded to the server. And we have another page where we see simple HTML. And in the editor, here we have a data structure that has more different kinds of data. We have a simple post that just has some style text. We have links, which have a URL that we can enter for the documentation link that you saw. We have screenshots where we say we have a file. So here we can upload files to this content management system and select it. And a link file is basically the same as a screenshot, except that it doesn't have the description. And here you see the data that I use on this data kind. So here you see the list of files that I uploaded. You can just select it from a pop-up menu. And the links are also very simple. You just enter the URL and that's it. The screenshot, it has a detailed description and a file that you can choose. And basically all very simple stuff, very small objects, very simple structure. The posts, they have a rich text attribute. So here you have this full-fledged styled text editor where you can basically enter all kinds of HTML. You can create links, you can create bullet lists, you can insert images or whatever you like. It's very easy to use and very powerful. And that's where you enter your data. So if we go to the structure here on this website is a little bit different to what we used in the agenda, because here we use groups. We just say, I don't care what kind of object that is, and we just say this is a group, it's called home, and it's displayed using a post viewer. And you can see these subnodes in the hierarchy. They are all in brackets because they are not visible on the menu. And here you see all this stuff. What you also see is the big main at the bottom. And this is so that you can pass information to the actual surrounding or to the framing main page. And here we just provide the copyright. So that on the website, you don't have to hard code your copyright, you can edit the copyright in your content management system. And if we have a look at what kind of components we use to display this thing, we have this main page. It has the hierarchy, and in this hierarchy we have some more data kind wrappers where we say, this is how you display a simple post, you just show its description. If we have the data kind none, that means that we have a group, and it would just display the name of the group. The link file, or the links, it already has it comes with its own anchor. That means that because this is an object model, we we can ask the objects, do you have an anchor? If not, I will wrap you into an anchor so that you can click on it. But if there is an anchor provided, we can customize the anchor, and SeaBreeze doesn't automatically create an anchor for us. And here we can just say, use the file attribute as a URL. And yeah, at the bottom you see the copyright. It's accessing the text attribute of the copyright object, and the copyright object is what we added to the main thing. Probably complicated. And the post viewer is what you see at on the content panel. You see we have a collection container that just runs on child objects, just like we did with talks. And there we have heading and style text, and that's it. And with this more or less simple description and those very simple concepts that we apply, we could create a whole website for SeaBreeze. And that's it. I want to especially thank Moya and Brand for creating all these lovely images that I use and for releasing them on Creative Commons. And that's it. Visit us at seabreeze.heeg or ask questions. I think I have 2 minutes for questions. 3? Okay. Yes?
What's the license on this software?
Ask my management.
So SeaBreeze itself is MIT licensed. About the content system, we haven't decided yet. So
I'm sorry, did I miss something? SeaBreeze is not the CMS?
no, SeaBreeze is the environment, the system, the CMS is built in.
Oh.
So
So
SeaBreeze
will
is
ship
everything
with,
that you saw
with
in
the next version of Visualize.
SeaBreeze is everything that you saw in the first part of the demo where I created everything around this object model and this stuff. And this is available on the MIT license and shipped with VisualWorks 7.10. And you can just use it if you like. But the content management part is built in SeaBreeze and on top of SeaBreeze, and that's currently not 100% completed yet and released.
Okay.
Any more questions?